Hey, we're back. So good to be back. It's so amazing how once we start thinking about a topic, it just keeps going, right? So welcome again, Karibu Jesubire. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button so that you always get information when we put up videos as regularly as we do. Now, the last time we were talking about the promise. The promise remains, right? And my mind stopped and I began to think about other things related to that. And one of the ones that really resonated with me was the question of how to stand on the promise. And why do I say that? Because it's one thing to receive a promise, it's another to believe it to the very end. Let me use myself as an example. A few years ago, God gave me a word. And it was about what my life must produce in terms of relationship and output and things like that. Where I was at that point is a very angry girl, just because of stuff that was going on in life, and I couldn't see how these things could work, right? So I said, yes, this is what God says, and then I waited year 1, year 2, year 3, and it just wasn't happening. So I would ask God, you told me this on the same day with so and so's has happened, mine hasn't. I'm very good at watching the world and watching things around me. So this particular day, I was really upset about it. And I remember we were at a retreat. We had gone for a retreat at the coast, and I knew going down, I spent the whole journey praying, and just I was restless. So of course I spent the trip praying. And by the time we got to the coast, it was very clear that this was a pivotal retreat. This would change my life completely. We were there Friday, Saturday, traveling back on Sunday night. We traveled on Thursday night. So meetings were Friday in the afternoon, Saturday all day, and Sunday morning. So you can imagine that's not a very long time for God to do his stuff. When we got to the venue where we were staying, it's a hotel that I had wanted to go to. So in 2010, we had an event in this particular hotel, and I was not able to spend in the hotel because it was too expensive. And I was work team. Now work team, we get rooms ikibaki. There were no remaining rooms. And I told God, I always want to come and spend a weekend in this hotel. So when this event showed up in that particular hotel, I was like, ooh, it's gonna work. As I walked through the gate, into the foyer, it was a realization that, oh my goodness, things are really beginning to be answered, because stepping on the foyer of this place, we arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning. We don't get rooms. Actually, it was a bit earlier, about 9:30. Rooms would not be available until 2 o'clock normally, and that's what they said. I remember sitting there and saying, Lord, I cannot wait until 2 o'clock for a room. Germany, I need to lie down. Anyway, when we sat in the foyer, they bring you this nice juice, you drink, you enjoy. It's really cool. Less than half an hour later, we had keys to our rooms. So we went to our rooms. And for me, that meeting was about understanding the word of God and accessing what was mine. And I kept telling God, you have promised, you have promised, you have promised, you have promised, you have promised. It was like a song coming out of my mouth. And on the Saturday evening, I just felt I've been here for 2 nights and it hasn't unlocked yet. And I didn't want to go back to my room. I was restless. So I just walked around the hotel. I went and sat by the pool with my feet in the water. Oh my goodness, it was so fantastic. And then one of the guards came and asked me, are you okay? I said, yes, I'm fine. I'm just thinking. And I sat there for a long time, listening to the message of the day, just thinking, meditating. And I took a different route to go back to my room, and I found myself walking through a garden, begging God that 12 noon Sunday doesn't happen and I have not met him. So on Sunday morning, I was up early. We went for breakfast, and I met one of my sisters, and she made reference to something that happened the day before. We had a conversation. Then she turned to our brother who was leaving and said, walk with this one. I don't know why. Anyway, so I walked with my brother. So he was carrying a cup of tea and going through his room and doing many things. So he's like, let's go. So I picked his cup and he stopped somewhere there. I stood there holding his cup. And then, of course, now the way I'm raised, when somebody goes into their room, you stand outside. So he's like, come in. I'm like, okay. So I walked in, I stood at the door. He's like, no, come all the way in. And he had a beautiful suite that overlooked the ocean. And I remember walking with confidence, small sister, walking into big brother's room. I walked in confidence all the way into his bedroom. And I turned and I looked out of the window and I almost had a fit. The path outside his room is where I had been begging God the night before to ensure that I do not leave that place without my word. And I almost screamed. So my brother came running and he asked me, what's up? I said, you have no clue. Last night, I was pushing and telling God I cannot leave this place without a word from you. And I was pacing these gardens right here. And then my brother said something. He said, you have access. I didn't know what that was about. But he said, you have access. And we left and we went into the meeting. When I was thinking about how do I stand on the promise, how do I keep solid, how do I stay firm, this story came back because I had spent the whole of that trip. It was 4 days, right? I spent the whole trip thinking about the word. So for me to stand on the promise, I must be sure of the word God spoke. It cannot be that somebody told me about it. It must be that God told me and then confirmed it. Does that make sense? It cannot be a second-hand word that I'm standing on as a promise. It has to be first-hand from the mouth of God to me. And then confirmed 3, 4, 5, however many witnesses he sends. So I must be sure of the word if I understand on the promise. And I must speak the word. Sometimes the thing God says he's going to do for us is beyond our wildest imagination. It's beyond. It's something my natural mind has not connected to because there are certain filters in me that are blocking. So you know the whole concept of you speak it until it becomes a reality? That is the thing about the promise of God. I would stand up and tell somebody, this is the promise God has given me. Of course, not everybody, because guys don't understand. But you can say the promise over my life is so such and such, and I'm standing on it. And you have people holding you accountable. And then when a circumstance comes your way that counters the promise, you stand up and say, Father, but this is your promise and this is what I stand for, because your word is yea and amen. It does not, return to you void. It accomplishes everything. Another situation comes and you say, Father, this is your word. So regardless of how it looks, I stand on your word that says da, 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 da. Because, beloved, until that word is alive and in every pore of our being, it wouldn't work. And I'm thinking back to even as recently as this week when I was looking at some of the promises God has given me and how people who are tied to those promises are not even in place yet. In terms of I know it is so and so, but when I look at how so and so's life is panning out, bado hajafika. He is not yet there. To stand on the word means it is a direct word from God that he sent confirmation for, and I speak it. I speak it in prayer. I speak it in meditation. I write it down and make it plain, like Habakkuk 2 says. And I speak it to every circumstance that counters the word of God. That, beloved, is how you stand on the promise. It's in what you think, what you say, what you accept, and what you acknowledge. Because the ways of the Lord are higher than us, right? And if it's going to take everything in me, it means that everything in me must be aligned to the promise, which means that if relationships come up that are counter to the promise, I walk away. If a circumstance shows up that seems to challenge the promise, I ask my Father for the response to that. And I do only that which he says to defend the promise. His promise is true. But are you standing on it in such a way that everything within you knows? Everything within you knows that it's going to happen. Liwe liwalo. It's going to happen, whatever the case. Hold on to that promise. Know it and where it came from. and then speak